What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another issue of your Friday night Magic pre-show, the EdCast. I'm your host, Cory. With me, of course, as always, is our co-host, Dylan. Dylan, how are you feeling this week?
Yo, how's it going, guys? Dylan of the EdCast here, and I'm feeling great.
So, second episode, first one, it had its moments. I think we had a great conversation, a lengthy conversation, but a good one.
Yeah, we got
so thank you guys for bearing it with us.
Yeah, the first one, we were turned up to 15. Let's turn it down to 11.
Yeah. turn to 15, and that's not just volume, but probably an hour. So we're gonna try and keep it nice and concise for you guys today. So today we got a little bit of Magic the Gathering news. Actually, a lot of news, but we're gonna try and trim it down to just the highlights for Commander players, and then we're gonna be talking about Oathbreaker today. But before we get into that, we did want to share a couple thoughts on the first episode. I think like we just joked around a bit. It went a little long, but I think it was good. I was pretty happy to at least get something out there. I don't know how you feel.
Honestly, I can't complain too much about it. It's been a while since either one of us has really done anything like this, and I think that for the first time of me and you specifically doing any content together, it went pretty well.
Yeah, you know what? I would agree because, so for those of you guys who don't know, Dylan and I, the only content we've done together is actually in Pokemon draft leagues. And I think then, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we ever did anything together where we're both recording at the same time. Because I believe most of the stuff I put up were you and I battling and then me dubbing over after the fact or narrating kind of as it went, but never where we were actually having a conversation.
Yeah, no, we never joined in voice call together. We would just battle each other for the draft leagues, and then we would each do our during competition or post battle commentary. But the EdCast was the first time we ever recorded something where we sat down in a call together and we could actually hear each other and speak with each other.
Yeah, and and again, I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. It had its moments. I think, obviously, I had this realization. I think you did as well. That the second we stopped recording last time, I was like, all right, laser focused. I know exactly what needs to happen. We need to trim this sucker down. We need to kind of hone in what we're talking about, and X, Y, and Z. Here's the to-do list to get done. But I think that only happens if you're really passionate about something. So I think it says that, hey, it's something we walked away from that conversation. We were both very excited. We both knew exactly what we really enjoyed, what we really, maybe didn't enjoy, but we knew what we could work on. And we knew right away, hey, this is something we want to keep doing and keep kind of perfecting with you guys and honestly for you guys.
Right. Yeah, no, I definitely feel exactly with what you just said. And before we get too far into this, I just want to remind people to make sure that you're not only listening to this on your podcast websites or YouTube, but make sure that you go to our Twitter page where you will see us do polls or talk about just how we're feeling about things. We'll ask questions and things like that, and you can keep up with us and talk with us there. That is at EdCast Pod on Twitter.
See, this shows you how new we are. Yeah, it's at EdCast Pod. That'll be Twitter, Instagram. I think that's also the back half of the handle on YouTube. Pretty much, wherever you want to look it up, YouTube, Spotify, Twitter, Instagram, OnlyFans. One day, the Dylan OnlyFan is right around the corner.
Hey, man, with the way that things are costing today, it might end up happening.
In this economy. All right, so like we said, we do have quite a bit of Magic Gathering news, so we're going to hop into it, I think.
Take us away.
All right, let's do it. So Minneapolis came and went. We are recording this on the 15th, I believe, of March. So
May.
Oh my God, I struggle to remember if it's the 15th, let alone if it's May. Yes, the 15th of May. So MagicCon Minneapolis was 2 weekends ago. They did have quite a bit of news. We're going to try and focus on just the commander-centric kind of stuff because there was a lot of news that was not a lot of flesh on the bones. A couple big announcements for us. So first off, Wilds of Eldraine, which is the next like core set. You know, there are a couple, I don't want to call them spin-offs, but there are a couple other ancillary sets upcoming. But Wilds of Eldraine is the next main set.
Our
Release date
summer
was
set.
announced. Yeah, our summer set was announced for September 8th. A whole lot out there. They did tease a couple photos, which I mean looked interesting. Obviously, we know the Kenriths are MIA in the ground as of March of the Machine Aftermath. So they did tease a little bit about the direction of Will and Rowan. They also showed some other characters kind of reappearing or revising themselves from Throne of Eldraine and all those stories.
Yes, the big ones being that we saw that Ashiok will be on the plane, which I was not expecting.
I saw Ashiok and I was like, ooh, Lord, I'm excited. But
I was not expecting them to be on Eldraine, but I think that'll be a fun Planeswalker. But the big character we saw that we're getting a card for is the gingerbread woman from the original Eldraine trailer that watched Garrick eat her husband.
And I'm gonna tell you this. I hadn't even seen the trailer. I was on Twitter looking at all this, you know, like just art. People were in the audience, like snapping pictures of the art. And as soon as I saw that picture, I was like, yes, next commander deck right here. I don't give two F's what it does. I haven't determined, we haven't determined if we're swearing on this podcast or not, but I wasn't given two you-know-whats about what that thing does. I was like, face commander right here, right now. I will cookie brute Voltron, whatever it is, that sucker is going in there with Ginger Brute, and I'm just gonna smash face with it.
With the gingerbread, what are your thoughts for its color identity?
Oh, so here's the thing. So with the Kenriths passing away, there's two voids in the like 5 arcing thrones, I guess. So for those of you guys who don't know, Eldraine kind of operates off of like 5 kingdoms that are all independently run for each color. So that's where you have like Yorvo for the green, stuff like that. But Linden is the queen for the white, and Kenrith. Well, no, Kenrith was the overarching king, correct? Because he has all 5 colors.
Yes,
Lord is exactly.
he was the High Lord of Eldraine, so he had been blessed by all the courts, but he lived in the White Court.
Right. So with them passing away, though, now you've got a void for either the 5 color or the Linden White Court, monarch.
And let's not forget, March of the Machines. We saw Ayara get Phyrexianized, so there's probably a gap in the Black Court as well.
That's true. So I feel like I could see the Ginger Priestess, whatever you want to call her, the Ginger Queen. I could see her fitting into one of those roles. I think white would be kind of a natural-ish fit, but for synergy's sake, I really kind of hope it's green because there's so many green food token type shenanigans you could do that, like, if it's green, I could put it in Golgari with the
Guillaume.
Oh, Guillaume. Yeah, Guillaume, the chef from Strixhaven.
So, we did see that the gingerbread woman it has the word Sir in the name, so it's a knight of a kingdom. So I'm pretty sure it's going to end up being colorless. I hope that it is not colorless.
Well, that makes sense because Ginger Brute's colorless.
But just based off of the backstory that we know from the original Eldraine trailer, where it was an alive gingerbread woman who watched the person she loved die, I could see black because
Rakdos gingerbread. She's a
Rakdos gingerbread
cookie.
because she's trying to get vengeance for the person that she loves. So there's a little bit of that black selfishness, but there's that red emotional input there.
So, okay, so she's red black. Let's go with your theory. She's red black, burnt cookie. Does she boss around Sir Conrad the Grim?
Yes.
100%, right? She's got to be like, cracking the whip. Usually, like 2 foot, or not 2 foot, she's like 2 inches tall, riding alongside like the 6 foot tall Sir Conrad, and she's the one leading him around, bossing him around. 100%. That's got to be the canon.
All right. So now to get into the main thing we wanted to talk about with Eldraine is the commander decks.
Yep. So they did announce 2 commander decks. I could be mistaken. I didn't really see too much depth in it besides just sort of what they cover. So I don't believe there's deck lists or anything like that out yet. But the two, we've got the Dimir Black Blue Fey Dominion, which I'm gonna throw it out here is probably gonna be like a wrinkly kind of deck. And then we've got the Selesnya Virtue and Valor, which 100% is tokens and counters because it's Selesnya, and that's just the way it be.
So, reading the descriptions off of the wiki, which I'm guessing these were things that were announced during the Magic Fest, but for Virtue and Valor, the Selesnya deck, buff your creatures and crush your foes with Sir Alavir's loyal woodland creature squires at your side. So this is going to be what appears to be a human who lives in the wilds who is bonding with animals. So I'm guessing it is going to be kind of a token strategy, buff your creatures, go wide, hit hard.
Right, which is your let's be honest, this is your standard Selesnya. When you look at green white, obviously is big for humans, it's big for elf ball type shenanigans. My wife actually, that's her kind of primary go-to deck is Kyler, who's a human tribal, where you go wide, you bring out a bunch of humans. When they enter, they all get counters and all that kind of stuff. It's just it's a staple Selesnya strategy. It works well. You're going to see it again and again in the future.
Yep. The character for the Virtue and Valor commander deck has a fox with her, so I'm guessing there's going to be fox tokens that you summon.
Saying she's a foxy lady.
And then the commander deck that I will personally be buying, the Dimir one, ally with Tagwild. Huh? Ally with Tagwild to summon flocks of fairies and play mischievous tricks on your foes. So this sounds like it's going to. There's two things that you're going to get when you're looking at a Dimir deck, and with it being fairies, it falls very well into both of these things. Dimir Control or Dimir Mill, and I could see this deck going either way.
Right, because we talk about Dimir. I mean, we talked last episode about Anawan in particular as a go-to kind of Dimir commander. Now, what I would be interested in is to see if this is the deck that Ashiok kind of plays a role, because they like to put like one planeswalker in each of these decks that you kind of opt out of pretty fast. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Ashiok in the Dimir deck.
Yeah, I could see maybe the one from War of the Spark being in this deck, the one that makes it so your opponent can't search for cards, and then it has the minus ability to make them mill 4 cards and exile their graveyards.
Because that would actually play into both if you think about it, because they give you both the mill and the control aspect.
Right.
And then there are a ton of fairies out there. I know that this is just a blue-black deck, but I kind of wish it was white, because then you could have a Layla. There are some fairies out there that this could be a decent place to see them reprinted. Bitter Blossom kind of gets up there in price from time to time.
I really doubt Wizards is going to give us Bitter Blossom, but we might see Una, Queen of the Fae, get reprinted.
Yeah, we could see Una. I think what's very likely is maybe not Bitter Blossom itself, but I could see like a lesser version of Bitter Blossom, in the same sense that in...
Oh, you know what? Let's follow Strixhaven's example. Let's get Bitter Blossom on a creature.
Right, or I was going to say like in Phyrexia All Will Be One, the Rebel deck didn't do Teferi's Protection, but they did Clever Concealment, which is like a Convoke-y kind of Teferi's Protection. It's like Teferi's Protection Light. So I could see something like that, where it's a Bitter Blossom, or oh shoot, what's the one that just came out that does Phyrexian Mites, like Norns something or other?
Oh, I can't remember the name, but I know exactly what
Yeah,
card
but
you're
it's
talking about.
essentially the same thing. It makes like 1/1 Phyrexian Mites with Toxic 1.
Yeah,
But same thing in white. I could see something like that, maybe like a watered down version. Like maybe it makes 0/1 flyers, or it you're right, it's on a creature and it costs 3 or 4, and you tap it to produce a fairy, something like that.
right. And the one thing that's really interesting to me about the Fey Dominion, first off, like I said, with it being blue black, it's probably going to be controller mill. And as I mentioned in the last video, I like playing a good mill deck. But this will the fairies are usually small creatures that don't cost a lot, and they
Mhm.
usually have flying, which means it is also good for a get a bunch of people on board, hit hard, and since they have flying, they've got that built-in evasiveness, which is also my other playstyle of getting a bunch of small so the deck's built for
Yeah,
me.
it's a yeah, it's a big kind of swarm the battlefield kind of approach. Now, the other big thing out of Wilds of Eldraine is the Walking Dead Secret Lair set. So the last couple years, they've been really focusing on getting the Secret Lair universes beyond stuff as universes within versions. So we've seen like Streets of New Capenna had the
The Stranger Things.
yeah, Stranger Things. I was like, I know it's not Street Fighter, and I know it's not Walking Dead because we're talking about Walking Dead. Yeah, so they had the Stranger Things. We did see the Street Fighter stuff pop up recently. I
I
mean,
can't
even before we just clicked record, we were talking about how King Kong just got reprinted in March of the Machine as the backside of one of the battles.
Yeah, I'm glad to see them going for in-universe version of the cards because honestly, one, I don't really believe in secret lairs. I've never bought a single one. And two, if I'm playing Magic, I want to use Magic characters. I don't want to use characters from other series. Like I'll make
Right.
the exception with the Warhammer commander decks because
Like
they're
pseudo
it's
D&D.
yeah, it's pseudo D&D, so it kind of fits in, but also I do hope that some of those get reprinted as actual Magic characters. The Tyrannoids are going to be kind of hard to do, but the other
Right.
things will be a little bit easier because Magic has humans, they've got artifact people.
Now, Um, two thoughts I had on the Walking Dead stuff, right? So like you said, I do like the fact that they're putting it in a universe within, because I don't know if you remember this or not, but this was the first like universes beyond Secret Lair they ever made. Actually, it's the first universes beyond they made, period, and then they kind of like retconned it to be universes beyond once they announced that as a line, but they got a ton of flack when this first came out because people were like, no, I don't want to see it. I don't want to think about it. I want my magic stuff to be my magic stuff. I want my other pop culture to be other pop culture.
Not only
But
that, but with them being a secret lair, they were only available for a limited time, which means that if you did
right.
not have the money to buy the secret lair for the
Mm.
week that it was available, you're just out of luck.
Yeah, and the prices have crept up quite a bit. So the main one I was thinking of was the Rick. It was a Steadfast Leader, I believe he's called, but he's the white. He's like a white human commander where he gives them all, I believe it's vigilance, life link, and something else.
A very useful card for commander.
Yeah, and then I think he also gives all other humans like +2/+2. Like it's a ridiculous pump effect. Um, but he was creeping up to 45-50 bucks because again, if you didn't buy the secret lair and it was a short printed secret lair, then it just wasn't circulating out there. Now, let me put this little thought in your head. Because the cards, they reprint, they're the exact same card, they just changed the art and the character. This will now be a mono white legendary something character, does this become the new Linden in Eldraine?
Honestly, that would, if it weren't for the fact that Linden is dead, I would say 100%.
That's what I'm saying. Linden's dead. Now, Linden is a lifelink style commander. This is a it has lifelink. This one's not necessarily a lifelink commander, but it has lifelink and, can be supportive of those strategies, and it's mono white. So maybe this becomes the lore. Maybe it's not Rick, but it's something else. It's just another white human that kind of slots into that role. Because we
Right.
know it's not going to be Will or Rowan from the standpoint of their red and blue.
Also, another thing to point out is when we got New Capenna, the Universe Beyond cards printed there were on the plane of Innistrad, so they're probably going to be characters from a different plane and not from Eldraine
Or
itself.
just sort of like dropped in unexplained.
Because they're all humans, I could really see them putting them on the plane of Ikoria and having them be some of the renegades from Drannith.
Okay. Or what would you think about, because after we visit Eldraine, the next big one is Ixalan. Would you think there might be a teaser for Ixalan upcoming?
I would probably say no, just for the fact that if they wanted to keep the cards kind of similar, the Last of Us characters are survivalist, so it would really fit Ikoria, where the whole point is to survive these monster attacks.
Walking Dead.
Yeah,
Last of Us.
I meant Walking Dead.
Different zombie survival franchise. Excuse me.
Yeah, but but with the Rick Steadfast Leader, just to show you guys how good of a card this is for Commander, its abilities. So it's 3/4. It costs 4 mana, 2 white, 2 colorless. As Rick enters the battlefield, choose 2 abilities from among First Strike, Vigilance, and Lifelink. Humans you control have each of the chosen abilities. As long as you control 4 or more humans you control get +2/+2. So humans are easy to get a lot on the board.
Right, because again, what I was saying with Kyler is, it's a Selesnya, that kind of thing. It's a Selesnya deck. There's a ton of mono white, mono green, or Selesnya humans that have things like, when this attacks, make 4 attacking 1/1 human soldiers. They're everywhere. There's Adeline. There's Torrens, Fist of the Angels. There's a bunch of them. So you could turn 1 to 4, like, in one turn rotation.
There's a lot of white cards that just generically summon 1/1 human tokens. But just think about this. You're going to have a lot of things on board, and they are going to have any combination of First Strike, Vigilance, and Lifelink. Do you want to have it to where you can spam getting life? Do you want to make it so that all your creatures hit first before your opponents get to hit them? Do you want to make it so that you can attack with all your guys and keep them up for blockers? You get to pick and choose how you want to mix and match those 3 abilities. I personally would probably do Vigilance and Lifelink, because now I can attack and block and gain a bunch of life in each rotation.
Yeah. So I mean, any of those 2 or 3 are pretty good. And then the other ones out of the set, I mean, Glenn, I remember being okay. I mean, the rest of them are okay. I mean, no, I think Rick is the one that's the go-to. Everything else will be nice to have, but I don't foresee them really.
I remember one of them being 5 colors.
I'm trying to think, because I don't have it in front of me and I don't really want to click around 1,000 times, but I remember Glenn is green, white, I believe. Daryl is red, green, or red, blue. Michonne is something. There's like 5 or 6 of them, but I haven't honestly looked at them in a while. Mostly because I can't afford them, but now maybe I can afford them. So again, Wilds of Eldraine comes out September 8th. Obviously, we'll know a lot more before that, because it's Wizards of the Coast, and they're going to start teasing it, like June 1st, essentially. By the time we get to September 8th, you'll know everything and its mother about every character that ever laid a fart in Wilds of Eldraine. Other big news, March of the Machine Aftermath launched Friday, as of us recording. about a week. Once this goes live, it'll have been live about a week. I just want to get your initial thoughts, Dylan. Favorite card? Do you like the set? Do you not like the set? It was small. It's a 50 card set as opposed to the much larger ones. But initial thoughts.
Okay, so the set itself, I can't really complain about. The cards do seem pretty decent, and the fact there's no common cards, that helps because they are smaller packs. You're only getting 5 cards, so not getting
So
bogged down with a bunch of commons is a plus.
I want to stop you right there because I had this thought, right? When they say, hey, there's no commons in the pack, but if I open a pack of 5 cards and I keep seeing the same stupid card, is that card not a common?
That
Like you
is
might you might
that is very
print,
fair.
you might print a gold leaf or something in the corner, but it's a common for the set, even if it's not a common.
Yeah. Now, I do have one major gripe with these packs. For one, actually, no, 2 gripes. One, you're only getting 5 cards, and it is still the same price as yeah, it's the same price as a regular booster pack. I would have liked to see them shave off $1, and a half. And my other gripe is the fact that you have a chance of getting anywhere from 3 to 5 foils in a pack, I believe. Which, if they're already such small packs, why not just make every card in the pack a foil? It does
Why
not
not just
cost
make it why not just call it a collector's booster and call it a day?
like it does not cost them more than maybe like a penny to put foiling on every single card. It
Now,
would have been possible.
I know you're active on Twitter, and I know you probably follow the same like magic creators and stuff that I do. Did you see the person who got a Ragavan, like the new Ragavan reprint? It pulled it on like the first pack, and the whole bottom's crimped because they sealed the pack and ran the crimper directly over the card.
I did see that picture online, and some people will actually pay more money for crimped cards.
I think I don't know. I was of two minds, right? Because on the one hand, I mean, crimping is not the worst thing I've seen because I've seen some fugly cards come out of some of these sets. But I think if I pulled one and it was crimped, I would be so mad, just so enraged.
From a collector standpoint, or if I was someone who bought cards to resell them, I would be mad. But as someone who just collects them to put in my personal collection or using decks, I wouldn't be so mad as long as I had a deck to throw it into.
So I think that depends on another point, right? If I was building a deck and Ragavan was the commander, I would be okay with it because it's like, it's not getting shuffled into the deck, blah, blah, blah. But if every time I shuffled that sucker in the 99 and I could see that stupid card just lifting the rest of the deck, that would bother me.
I don't
Like
think
from just a visual standpoint, I'd be like, there's Ragavan.
I don't think the crimping would be bad enough to have it affected in the deck, especially with it being sleeved. And with a card like that, it's probably going to be double sleeved. So,
Right.
But yeah, no.
Now,
If
the foil collector rares, those are the ones where it's like an arch,
the Pringles,
it's like a rainbow of it's like a rainbow. Yeah, the Pringles. Oh, have you seen people where they get kicked out of tournaments for that too?
Yeah, and we shouldn't be kicked out of tournaments for their problems printing foils.
Oh, so this is why I bring it up is when you look at a set like this where you go, okay, you could arguably say it's a collector's booster kind of set, or you could just make it that way because I could pull 5 foils realistically. I mean, if I got 5 foils out of there and they were all, if it looked like the golden arches out of McDonald's and I got kicked out of some LGS, woo! You think the Pinkertons are coming to my house? I'm gonna show up to Mark Rosewater's house. Especially if I paid money for that tournament. I'm slapping Mark Rosewater.
Yeah, but you can't have any March cards, even though that's not our problem. Like, there are ways to fix that whole crumpling, but if you just got the card, you're not going to have enough time to fix it.
And I'll tell you what. So I know you said you've never bought a secret lair before. So I've bought two actually. I bought two secret lairs, and I intentionally did not get the foil because of that reason. Because I was like, if I got 10 cards and they all looked like that, I would be very upset. So I actually spent the money and they lost a sale because I knew that spending an extra $10 on the foil, the quality would not be up to my par.
Right.
But anyway, so on this set, so the other big thing I had is if we do 50 cards, and we can talk about if they're common, not common, whatever. Would you rather see more sets like this, or would you rather have those like, hey, here's a 300 card March of the Machine, and then in September you're going to see a 300 card Wilds of Eldraine, and then Ixalan's going to hit with 300 cards? Or would you rather see, every month, every other month, like a 50 card set that's more curated?
So I don't remember the actual official term for it, so I'm just going to call it a supplementary set for right now.
Yeah, which essentially is what it is. It's like an anthology kind of set.
Right. So sets like this, where it's less cards per pack, but it's used to wrap up a set. I feel like this is actually something that Wizards is doing in the right direction with Magic. However, I do feel like maybe the set should just be a little bit bigger. Maybe instead of 50 cards, make it 75 cards and give us 7 cards per pack.
Or what I would say is I would almost like it in the opposite. Like instead of giving me the big set up front and then you give us like little breadcrumbs behind it, give it to me as a teaser. Like, okay, we all know that if we look at Wilds of Eldraine, or the next big one's going to be Lord of the Rings here in a couple weeks in June. If they, instead of using or releasing some of these cards like a month ago and showing me 2 cards a day or whatever, if they said, okay, in April we're going to release 50 cards, then in the next month we're going to release 50 cards, and then maybe you have a 200 card set in June that's the main Lord of the Rings set, something like that, I think I would be down for. Is kind of like, to hype me up going into it, as opposed to kind of you gave me my big high up front, and then I'm kind of tapering off about why should I care about these cards when your marketing also wants me to be focused on the next big set.
Right. No, I get exactly what you're talking about. But while you were explaining that, I just thought of the perfect way they could do these supplementary sets.
Mm.
So we get about, let's say, 45 to 55 card prequel set that sets up the big going on of the main set, and then we get an aftermath type set afterwards. It's about the same as the prequel set, which would kind of go back to the way that Magic used to be 3 sets per block to tell the story for each plane.
Right. Where it
So,
was, you went to Tarkir and you were there for a year. You went to Kamigawa and you were there for a year because they,
right,
led up, hit their stride, and then
but
had an
Wizard,
aftermath.
yeah, but Wizards got rid of that because they were like, well, not every set can supplement having well, each story can't supplement 3 sets, and the middle set people just kind of don't care about. But if we did just
Oh,
like like a small set before the actual set to get us ready for it, then the actual set, then kind of a epilogue to it. So it's like, oh, here's us building up the conflict. Here's the conflict in the big set, and then here's what happens after the conflict in a little mini set.
right. So I think so. What you're talking about, and I think it's purely a sales based thing. The reason why they don't do the blocks anymore, is what they used to call them, is not every plane is for every person. So when we look at recent planes, like Streets of New Capenna was very heavily promoted as being a 3-color focus set. And not everybody wants this. Some people are like, "Oh, but I'd rather go to Shards of Alara," which again, 3 colors, but a different set of 3 colors.
Right.
Um, or let's say like you and I, we both talked about last time about how much we both enjoyed Strixhaven. Well, I'm sure there's somebody out there that was like, "I don't like Strixhaven." So instead of them not buying cards for 8 months, this way they're like, "Oh, you don't like Strixhaven? Well, guess what? We're going in the complete opposite direction. you know, you don't like Tarkir? Well, you're not going to sit through it for all of 2024. We're going to give you this, and then we're going to run all the way over there, and then we're going to come all the way back over here. Which I think the Phyrexian invasion, story-wise, we can talk about how it was and how, you know, how many flaws there could have been. But I think the Phyrexian invasion was their way of kind of like giving everybody that sweetener, because they could go, here's what's happening on Kamigawa. Now, this ties into the bigger story, but if you didn't like Kamigawa's you know, like art style and art direction, now we're going to take you over to this other plane, and we're going to, you know, now maybe you didn't like that, but you like Theros. Oh, you didn't care for Theros. Well, let's come over here to, you know, Kaldheim, and they just bounce around a little bit.
Right. No, and that was one of the things with it was marketing for one. They said they had a hard time coming up with 3 consecutive sets that played well together, and they could make mechanics that worked well across all 3 without reusing the mechanics.
Mhm.
But then they also mentioned people not liking being on the same plane for an entire year, which is why we went to the 2-block system at some point, and then we got down to just the single set per plane. But a lot of people are complaining that one set isn't enough for planes a lot of the times, and there are planes that people love where we're only there for one set, and then we never know when we're going to see them ever again, because everybody just keeps seeing us going back to
Mhm.
Dominaria or Ravnica, and
Right,
people.
and then the challenge too then becomes, when you revisit it, how different do you have to make it? So, like for Kamigawa, you know, they had a Kamigawa block back in the day, but when we came back for Neo, or you know, Neon Dynasty, um, you know, they had to make it different flavor wise. So if you were looking for old school Kamigawa, you didn't get what you were looking for. I mean, you kind of did. It was still samurais and ninjas and all that kind of stuff, but they couldn't just go, oh, we're going to plop you back down to this thing you haven't seen in 15 years.
Right, and the other issue with the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty is the amount of time that's taken place between the sets, because the Kamigawa block
Mm-hmm.
story took place like 4,000 years before the current storyline, so Kamigawa needed to be advanced thousands of years compared to the previous one. And I'm not
Right,
saying
but
that I don't like the direction they went with, but I
oh
don't
no,
know.
I love the direction they went
Yeah,
with. Like, I really like Neon Dynasty,
yeah.
but
Some
I do
people,
understand what you're
yeah,
saying.
some people are just like, well, Cyberpunk isn't really Magic the Gathering, and I can understand that argument. There's been a lot of high tech stuff in Magic the Gathering.
Mhm.
Artificers have been around since the beginning, and we've seen some pretty cool artifacts throughout. But I can kind of understand where that might pull people out. Like Streets of New Capenna kind of pulled me out because I was like, 1920s New York doesn't really feel like Magic the Gathering.
No, but here's the problem with that, right? So if you go back to Streets of New Capenna on the next set, well, you
Streets
know,
of New
let's say
New Capenna.
right, or let's say like 5 years from now, we go to Streets of New Capenna again, and now it's, you know, alleyways of old Capenna or something. Do you advance it forward? Like, hey, instead of being 1920s gangsters, or is it now like 1990s Goodfellas? I mean,
No,
like, well,
next time we go to Capenna, it's going to be 1929 Great Depression.
now instead of the demon crime families were the cops or something. I mean, like, what do you
I mean,
like? There's certain things.
the Angels are back. It could be a cop centric set.
The next set is about Elspeth coming back and just wailing on the demon lords. But to wrap this bit up real quick, favorite card. Quick hot take. What's your favorite card from the set?
Favorite card from the set, Spark Rupture.
Okay.
Yeah, so Spark Rupture, for those of you that don't know, when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. It costs 3 mana, 1 white, 2 colorless. But the thing that I like about this is that each planeswalker with 1 or more loyalty counters on it loses all abilities, and it is a creature with power and toughness equal to the number of loyalty counters on it. So this is going to be a new fun way to either play your planeswalker decks or shut down your opponent's planeswalker decks, because it's going to turn every planeswalker into a vanilla creature.
I also like, by the way, when I was looking at this, it has got a nice flavor to it for the set, because the set is littered with a lot of planeswalkers that don't have their spark anymore, or I don't know that we're 100% sure because I didn't read the aftermath storyline.
Yes, planeswalkers are losing their sparks,
For
and
question mark reasons, or do we know?
uh, it was not explained why they're losing their sparks. Just the fact that their sparks have been destroyed for some reason. At the end of the March of the Machines, we actually saw Nissa's spark crumble away as it was pulled out of her body while she was being purified.
Hmm.
And then in the aftermath storyline, we saw where Nahiri's spark entered a Hedron and then it vanished from the Hedron.
Mhm. So I do like. What I was going to say is I do like that card. You mentioned it as a kind of a flavor win. So we did talk about how, yeah, this is kind of an oddly placed set, but I do think that is a bit of a flavor win when you look at the set as a whole. And then the card mechanics themselves are actually. I mean, I when you showed this card to me, because I actually didn't see it until you showed it to me. Um, I found it pretty interesting because it's one of those. I like cards that you can use offensively or defensively, and this kind of hits both notes for me.
Yeah, no, it's a flavor win and it is also just a win in a deck. This is going to be a very big utility piece for a lot of decks.
Mhm.
And I want to see how people are going to play around this card, whether it's them using it or playing around their opponents putting one down, because enchantment removal is not as common as creature or artifact removal. Now, it's more common than planeswalker removal, but now planeswalkers are creatures, which means now you can use your creature removal on planeswalkers.
um, and then I mean, oh shoot, what's his name? I just had it. What's the from Tarkir, the planeswalker about the dragons?
Sarkhan?
Uh, Sark on these nuts. No, I don't know why. I heard that joke on Twitter earlier, and I was like, I gotta use it. Come to Internet 2012. I don't know why. I just loved it so much. But yeah, so my favorite card is Sarkon Soul of Flame. Is one blue red, so you get a nice little is it 2/4 human shaman. I like it. It's dragon spells you cast cost one less to cast. Whenever a dragon enters the battlefield under your control, you may have Sarkon Soul of Flame become a copy of it until end of turn, except its name is Sarkon, and it's a legendary in addition to its other types. As soon as I saw this, I was like, Miram, here we come. Gives me cost reduction. Uh, it likes other dragons entering the battlefield, which is really good because if you get a dragon out that doesn't have haste, for example, let's say like a Balefire dragon or something, something, or one of the ancient dragons. We talked about ancient copper dragon a lot last episode. If I can play ancient copper dragon and then instantly have a Sarkon become that and attack right away, I love it. I was like, slot this bad boy in.
Right, no, no. This is going to be really good in a lot of dragon decks. Now, I know that blue isn't one of the more common dragon colors, but they've been trying to fix that in recent Magic. Dragons tend to be red and black a lot, I've noticed. So I can't wait to.
They've actually done a couple red and blue precons for dragons because you had Furcrag it's a dragon deck, but it's really kind of a goad deck, but
Right.
it's goad with dragon flavoring.
But with them introducing blue as a color for dragons more frequently in more recent years, I feel like this is going to be a really good staple in dragon decks. And
Yeah,
one
this is
thing,
definitely in the 99 card.
yeah,
Let's be clear about that.
the one thing that's good about Sarkhan though is that he goes great into any deck based around the card that we're named after, because the Dragon is all colors.
Yeah. So,
Because
like I
no,
said, this
actually,
is a
imagine this though. This card
Mhm.
in an Dragon deck, because you have Dragon's Eminence reducing your dragons by 1. Now
this comes
Sarkhan's
out costs
reducing them by
a
1.
2. And then when you finally bring out your Dragon for 2 cheaper, he becomes an Dragon on that turn.
So then your dragons will cost 3 less for that turn.
I mean, honestly, if you really because now I'm thinking about, if you really wanted to screw around, you could command beacon out your dragon. Um, you know what I'm saying? You could command beacon out some expensive dragons, then just have Sarkhan flip right into it for the turn.
Right.
Which any dragon that has, I mean, it's not going to get any ETB effects off of the copying, but any dragon that has like an attack trigger, I mean, this is fantastic for any dragon that has a activated ability or a triggered ability. Fantastic.
Right. The only problem there is that Sarkhan does not have haste, so you'll have to transform into another dragon on the next turn. So hopefully he lives.
Right.
Unless the dragon he copies has haste.
Yeah, because then he will have haste. So yeah, this one right here, I was like, into Miram, don't even think about it. Beautiful.
Right. No, this slots very well into Miram. And before we go away from the section, just one little fun Sarkhan fact for everyone out there, maybe people who are newer to Magic or just have not paid attention, but there is a Sarkhan for every color of mana except for white. You've yet to see Sarkhan use white mana.
You know what? I hadn't considered that, because when you said any color except for, my brain instantly went green, and then I was like, no, wait, there is a green Sarkhan.
We have two green Sarkhans, actually. The original Sarkhan Vol, and then Sarkhan Unbroken.
Yeah, because Sarkhan, I mean, I think even blue, honestly, when I saw this card, I was like, Sarkhan and blue, because honestly, when I think Sarkhan red, obviously is the first thing that comes to mind, because he's dragon associated, which means red is also the first thing that comes to mind when you think of dragons. In the same sense that, like, you have a zombie commander like a Liliana, you instantly know it's black because zombies, black is their primary color.
Right, unless you're on Innistrad, then it might be blue.
Yeah, it might be blue. Which, by the way, this is a whole nother tangent, but if you look at the Innistrad, like, zombie commanders of Gissa and Geralf blows. I mean, Gissa's like, oh, all these great Gissa cards. There's one Geralf card, hot dookie.
Well, it's because his art takes longer to get done. But,
Yeah.
you know, you were talking about colors that you associate with Sarkhan. I instantly think red as well, but I always think red-black because the first Sarkhan I was ever introduced to was Sarkhan the Mad.
I can see that. All right, so that's Aftermath. One last bit of news, and then we're going to hop into our main topic for the day. But other big bit of news, and we saved this one for the last bit because I think we have the most to talk about it. But we'll try and do some hot takes here real quick. Commander Masters, we know, releases on August 4th. Now, they've been teasing that there are 4 Commander decks pretty much since the set came out. So they teased that there was an Eldrazi, a Planeswalker, Sliver, and an enchantment deck. So we have known the names of these decks, but finally they released the commanders. So here's what I'm going to do, just so we kind of keep on pace here for time. I'm going to read them real quick. I want your 2-second hot take, 1 through 10, rating of the deck, or of the commander, because we don't know too much about the deck. What we do know about the decks is they each come with 10 new cards and 90 reprints. So 1 through 10, what do you think of the commander? Will you play it or not? How would you build the deck if you were to build it just based off this commander? So first off, we're going to go in order, alphabetical order of the deck name. So we've got the commander of Eldrazi Unbound, which is Zuladuk, Void Gorger. 5 colorless and a waste for a 7/4 Eldrazi. Colorless spells you cast from your hand with mana value 7 or greater have Cascade. So 1 through 10, what are we thinking? Do you want it? Do you not want it? How are we building this deck?
So I'm going to give this commander a right in the middle of 5.
Okay, I was thinking 6 for me personally, but okay.
So the reason why I'm giving it the 5, 1, 6 mana for a 7/4 is not bad. And having the double cascade is really fun because any card that you play gets you 2 free spells.
Right, so
How
you're getting 3 total, the main spell and then the 2.
right. However, I'm not a huge fan of this Eldrazi because aside from the fact that the card says it's an Eldrazi, it does not feel like an Eldrazi because it doesn't have
It
any of
doesn't have
those
Annihilator.
no Annihilator. It doesn't have any when you cast this card type abilities. And if this is supposed to be some hidden away 4th Titan, I can see why it hasn't been an issue yet because it doesn't seem as powerful as the other
It's no
Eldrazi.
it's no Emrakul, it's no Kozilect. It's definitely none of them because the other ones, one costs a lot more mana for sure, but you get a lot more, I think, bang for your buck out of them. Whether it's taking other people's turns, whether it's preventing people from playing odd number spells.
When this thing attacks, your opponent mills the top 20 cards of their deck.
And that's on top of Annihilator. Oh, when this attacks, Annihilator 4. My initial thought was 6. And what I actually thought about was, would this work or would this be better for not Eldrazi but for high mana value artifacts? So I actually looked up like artifacts that are 7 or greater mana because there are a lot of ways to kind of like cheat the cost of artifacts. Um, there's like 150 of them, and maybe 10 of them are good. Like you've got Blightsteel Colossus, stuff like that. But the first thing my brain went to was Wormcoil Engine, which is 6 mana, so I can't even use it for that. So I have to go for like hyper aggressively expensive artifacts, and even then, they're not all that fantastic.
Now, if this was something that was a dragon and didn't require colorless, if this was a dragon commander, no matter what colors it was, this would have been a whole lot. Like this would have been at least a 7 for me.
Yeah, okay, let's make it harder to cast, right? We're gonna get rid of, instead of 5 colorless and a waste, so 6 total mana. If it was 1 colorless and Wooburg, which is the same mana value but harder because the color combinations, and just said dragon spells you cast from your hand with 7 or greater have cascade. Oh, 100%. That at least takes it up 1 to 2 notches,
right,
on its own.
And I get it. This card is supposed to make it so that you cast your Titans and hopefully get other things out for free. Now, if this deck comes with copies of Emrakul, Kozilek, and the third one, well, it might not come with like, yeah, like it might not come with like their best versions, but the ones that people don't really play, like, could I see this happen? I could see those getting reprinted because of Commander Masters being kind of like this big set that's supposed to be worth it. But
right, but if they put, let's be realistic here. So Emrakul and all of them are usually, $50, $70 cards right now. Some have gone up over 100.
Yeah, Emrakul Promised End. Last time I checked, it was about $38.
Well, isn't one of them also banned? That's your other.
Yeah, it's the other Emrakul, not
Aeon's Torn.
Yeah, Aeon's Torn. But
okay, so
Promised End right now is $42.50. And from what I heard, these precons are supposed to be closer to $90 each. So they might actually throw in some of the Eldrazi Titans. And if they do that, it might bump me up to about a 6. But as it is, this commander's like a 5 because you already got to spend a lot of money on the deck. Then you got to spend money actually buying the good Eldrazi.
All right, guys. Sorry about that. We had a quick little audio disruption talking about the next commander. So we're going to re-record a little bit. The beauty of Hollywood, California, which neither of us live in. But,
we're on the opposite coast.
Yeah, the eastern Hollywood, California, and Virginia and Florida, respectively. But the next commander we were going to talk about is from the Enduring Enchantments. That's a mouthful, if I ever said one. Deck that is Anikathia. I recorded this once already, and I still can't pronounce the name. Anakhthea, Hand of Erebos. For 2 white, black, green, we get a 4/4 legendary enchantment creature demigod with menace. Other enchantment creatures you control have menace. When Anakhthea enters the battlefield or attacks, exile up to 1 target non-aura enchantment card from your graveyard. Create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 3/3 black zombie creature in addition to its other types. So I'll start this off. So I believe we gave 5 and 6 respectively to Zuladak, Void Gorger, the Eldrazi commander. I think this is better. I'm going solid 7 for me personally. Last episode we talked a little bit about Merkle, who same colors, a little more expensive because Merkle is a 7 cost as opposed to a 5. But this kind of is like the same thing, but in a opposite sort of direction. So Merkle is whenever a creature you control dies, you can exile it to make a token. This is an enchantment, so it turns your creatures into enchantments. This one kind of does the opposite. So whenever Anaktha enters the battlefield or attacks, so you could foreseeably get a couple triggers on this, at least 1 trigger a turn. You exile 1 enchantment from your graveyard, and you can turn it into a 3/3 black zombie that is your enchantment. So I like it. I think there's definitely some cool stuff out there that you can turn into creatures. Dylan, what were your thoughts on this?
Okay, so solid 8.5. I think it's the best face commander out of the 4 we've been shown. As you mentioned, enchantment recursion is a really fun thing, and it's something that's a little harder to do. It's a lot easier to recur artifacts and creatures. So
100%.
having something that can recur your enchantments, which I know there is enchantment recursion, but just having that extra bit of ways to do it is not bad.
Yeah,
And
most of the enchantment recursion I can think of are not enchantment specific recursion. It's sort of like you got like your Balagan recoveries, you've got your Eternal Witnesses, stuff like that lets you kind of take a card and put it back to your hand.
right. Uh, Another good thing about this card is that in black, green, and white, there are a lot of enchantments that you are going to want to recur. You can get your Smothering Tithes back. You can get your Parallel Lives back. You can get your Dictate of Erebos back.
The Hand of Erebos can bring back the Dictate of Erebos.
So
I think if you attack somebody with a zombie Dictate of Erebos, I don't know that they like you at the table anymore.
But you know what? Here's the thing, though. When we first recorded this, we were talking about just regular enchantments. But just rereading this card, it just says non-aura enchantment. So you can still use this on a creature-heavy deck by using enchantment creatures.
Right, which actually, I mean, do go hand in hand. So last episode when we were talking about Merkle, we talked a lot about Constellation creatures, which are all enchantment creatures that do something when an enchantment enters the battlefield. They activate X ability. So those are enchantment creatures. So if they get destroyed, they are, and then you use Annika to attack or enter the battlefield. They are technically enchantments that you could then exile to create a 3/3 black zombie version of that enchantment creature again. Ironically, because they are creatures in addition to other types, that token would also be an enchantment creature, so it would still get the same kind of enchantment synergies.
Right.
I do understand why it's non-aura, because obviously that would be a big whole rules nightmare to try and figure out.
Yeah. I mean, unless it became one of those things, like if you could allow aura, it could just give it the bestow ability where when the creature is equipped to dies, it becomes a creature.
Right.
But that would be too much. That would be too much text to put on a card, though.
Yeah, because then you'd have to put the rules reminder text underneath all this text that's already on the card. I mean, so if we look at Zuladoc again real quick, and I look at that text box, it's a third of it is maybe the ability, and then the remainder of the text box is explaining what cascade, comma cascade means. Like you have two words
Right.
that need like a 70 word descriptor, you know?
Now, the good news is with the colors being the same, uh, Anixia will slot
Mhm.
well into a Merkle deck, or Merkle will slot well into a deck for her.
Right. And I mean the other thing is with the black aspect, you know, you do have a lot of zombie tribal kind of base things too. So having a bunch of 3/3 enchantment menace zombies is not the worst thing in the world. It's not the hardest thing to abuse in the world either. So I wouldn't be surprised to see or other like zombie based strategies built into this. But I would say that if we look at Zuladoc and we look at Anathia, it's night and day difference between seems to be an easier deck to build because Zuladoc seems very narrow into only a certain card you could build. And Anathia seems like the world's your oyster because these are the probably the best colors for enchantments, honestly.
Right. The only thing that I would probably change about this for an enchantment build is maybe replacing
Ew.
white with blue, because blue has a lot of good
Uh-huh.
enchantments, and also that would help with the zombie strategy.
But then here's the problem. So if you go, I mentioned this on the last recording, which was smothering tithe, zombies being silly. If you go for blue, got to deal with Ristic Study zombies. A bunch of nerdy little elf zombies coming at you with books.
Yeah, no, like either way you go, like that's why I would replace the white with the blue, because either way you're going to have things people don't want on
Oh, you're
board.
gonna have a busted staple, 100%. Because let's just look at what's there. In green, you've got Sylvan Library. In black, like you said, you've got Dictator Erebos. You've also got like your Phyrexian Arenas. In white, you've got Smothering Tithe.
Land
In
tax.
blue, you've got Land Tax. You've got Dictator Erebos, or no, I'm sorry, not Dictator Erebos. You got Ristic Study in blue. You know, there's just not to mention um, I think you brought this one up on the last recording as well, which is you've got Ghostly Prison in white, and if you went in blue, you'd have propaganda. So, do you want to have a zombie running around that makes people pay to attack you, but also has menace?
Oh, you know what, I forgot to mention the menace on this is really good because a lot of commander decks, unless they are creature head, like a creature focused combat deck,
Mhm.
they're not going to have a lot of creatures on board. So the menace makes it harder for them to block your enchantment creatures.
Right, and I will say so. Obviously, the comparison I put this commander to is Merkel, right? Same color, same enchantment play around. Merkel struggles from the standpoint that you are removing creatures to create enchantments, so you're almost like creating openings. Now you get around that by having effects that help prevent damage and stuff like that. This does the opposite, where you can kind of like force a board state out of a deck that doesn't necessarily have a board state. So I do like that quite a bit.
And if you
Um,
ever get behind, you're in a good color combination for board wipes.
exactly. Now, um, things that wish they had a great or a better board state to another thing that wish that they had a better board state, planeswalkers. So the next deck we're going to look at is Planeswalker Partey, uh, led up by Commodore Guff, who is one, a blue, red, and a white for a 5 loyalty legendary planeswalker, Guff, who comes with a static ability that says at the beginning of your end step, put a loyalty counter on another target planeswalker you control. For +1, you can create a 1/1 red wizard creature token that has tap, add 1 red mana, spend this mana only to cast a planeswalker spell. Then we have -3, which is draw X cards, and Commander Guff deals X damage equal to, or I'm sorry, to each opponent, where X is the number of planeswalkers you control. And then, like all the planeswalkers that can be your commander, there's a line that says Commodore Guff can be your commander. Otherwise, this would be invalid. Um, Going to the party, not going to the party. Did you RSVP for the deck? How are we feeling here?
So I'm going to give this deck a I'd probably give it a 6. I like it a little bit more than the Eldrazi, but not as good as the enchantment deck. So I'm actually going to go over the abilities in the reverse order of how they're printed on the card this time, because I feel like as you climb up, it gets a little bit more
Worse.
discussion-y.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's true.
So the -3 ability, no matter
Mhm.
what, this is a solid ability because it gives you card advantage from your draws and you're dealing damage to all your opponents. And the point is to have a bunch of planeswalkers on board, which means you're going to be able to draw more planeswalkers so that the next time you use the ability, you're able to deal more damage and draw more cards.
Right now, let me ask you this. So if you had Commodore Guff out for turn three, let's just say, let's say you were able to ramp for a turn, you brought out turn three. This is your only commander now, or I'm sorry, your only planeswalker at that point. Now, -3, usually the alts you have to build up to on a commander, or on a, I keep saying commander, but on a planeswalker, you usually have to build +1 once or twice to be able to use the alt without killing it. This one you can alt right away. Would you alt for a draw one, ping 1 damage to each opponent, or would you hold at that point?
Yeah, I would definitely hold it. I feel like the -3 is I feel like you only really need 2 planeswalkers on board to make it worth it, because even being able to dig 2 cards deeper into your deck might help you find a key piece to a combo.
Yeah, draw two, deal six is what that would just ultimately come out to.
Right. So I'd say as long as you have at least one other planeswalker on board, Guff's -3 isn't the worst thing to go for. Now, obviously, you're probably going to want to wait till you have 3 or 4 planeswalkers, but this card's going to be coming out turn 4 if you go on ramp, and it would be possible to have 3 planeswalkers because there are a few 2-drop planeswalkers out there.
Yeah, now my only issue is if you do the 2-drop planeswalkers, right, which are like Tybalt, it's kind of the common example. They're usually not the best. Like, there's some viable-ish ones, but do you run them in this deck just on the chance of like, hey, I bring out a 2-drop, or do you save your 2-drop still for like your classic ramp cards like your arcane signets and stuff like that?
Yeah, that
Because
is definitely the thing. So by the time he comes
if I
out,
bring out a 2-drop, I'm not activating its loyalty. It's just sitting there for the X ability.
yeah, oh, yeah, it's really hard to say how you would want to do that, but the 2-drop might be worth it depending on what else you got in hand. Now, Guff's +1 ability, we can probably both agree this is kind of a middle of the road ability. Creating the 1/1 wizard token. That's good. That gives
Mhm.
you a body to protect your planeswalkers with. The fact that it only taps for red mana is the biggest problem with the wizard token, because you're limited to just red mana. This mana can only be used for planeswalkers. Let us choose which color it goes for.
Yeah, so noble and ignoble hierarch are usually the staple on mana dorks for these, which are 1 mana and they tap for 3 colors. You can pick which of the 3 colors, but you can utilize those for whatever you want. Um, so having it where it's already restricted to what spell type you can use, which is only planeswalkers, and then restricting it even further to just red seems like a flavor loss. And also, I mean, when I'm looking at this, why doesn't it have haste? I got a +1 to get out a 1/1 mana dork, then I gotta wait a whole turn to get 1 red mana that I can only use on planeswalkers. I don't know. It seems very restrictive for a 3-color commander. If this was a red only, planeswalker
I mean,
thing,
if
maybe.
this was a red planeswalker, the tokens would have haste.
Exactly. And it
But
probably wouldn't be wizards, it would just be dragons or goblins.
but again, being able to put out the defensive body, that's pretty good. And then his static ability of putting a counter on any planeswalker at the end of your turn, except for himself. There's a lot of planeswalkers that are good that only have minus abilities. There are planeswalkers that your opponents will automatically attack. This is a good way to bolster them, or just to get to your ultimates faster.
And there's definitely planeswalkers, like I said, that only have minus that people want to get rid of, and like we talked about Ashiok when we were talking about the Demir deck. I mean, Ashiok is one that because of her static ability or their static ability, I guess, um, people want to get rid of that planeswalker. So having the ability to add a counter to it is useful. And then you're right that planeswalkers do tend to get more value when they can create their own defensive bodies. Because unlike your creature-based commanders, planeswalker commanders can actually be targeted for attacks.
Right. Now, I will say the color combination of red, white, and blue. This is really good for a commander based deck because white and blue is where you're going to get most of your stacks cards, like your propagandas, your ghostly prisons, your mystic remoras, your ristic studies.
Mm.
So you'll have ways to protect your planeswalkers, which is
Well, and
good.
also, and on that same note, I mean, red having a lot of damage-based board wipes
Yeah, like,
helps too because your chain reactions are only going to target creatures.
and your
So
blasphemous
you'll
acts
lose
will,
your you'll lose your wizards, but your planeswalkers will be perfectly fine.
and once you burned your opponent with the -3 enough, once you've board wiped, play your spark rupture.
Yeah, that's true. Spark Rupture. When I was thinking about that card, who comes to mind is Gideon, because Gideon already wants to turn into, well, like most of the Gideon cards already want to turn into like 4/4 soldiers.
Yeah, but no, Gideon doesn't go with this card. Gideon goes no, it doesn't go with spark rupture. Gideon goes with deification.
Um, so yeah, I think this would be about a 7 or an 8 for me as far as a commander. It's interesting. Think out of the three we've looked at, it's the one so far that like hooks me in probably the most, only because when I look at the Eldrazi, I figure it's either going to be an expensive deck to build, and also Cascade's not the most intriguing, I think, because a lot of people do not like you either love Cascade or you do not like Cascade at the table.
Didn't we just
Um,
get a Cascade Commander deck?
no, not Cascade. Convoke.
Right. I feel like there was a Cascade one not too long ago, though.
It could be. I might be misremembering. The one I'm thinking of is the Convoke white deck that came out of March of the Machine.
Yeah,
But I mean, it's like Cascade exists. A lot of people don't like it. Um, the enchantment one. I mean, I've got Miracle. I'm happy with Miracle. The Planeswalkers are interesting. My only concern here is Atraxa exists. And Atraxa is, I think if you go on like EDH Rec, Atraxa's if not number one, maybe top, at least like top five, like most popular commanders of all time.
yeah. Trax is definitely good with super friends because of proliferate.
Proliferate. Yeah. So that being said, let's look at our last one here. Last one being Sliver Swarm. Now, before we read the card, I will tell you that out of the four, when the four deck archetypes were released, I mean, Sliver and Eldrazi, I'm pretty sure were the two that everybody was like, take my money, you know?
Sliver was the one that I was most interested in because I want to build a Sliver deck.
Well, and a lot of the good slivers, I mean, the good slivers are expensive. They haven't been printed in a while. Um,
Oh,
Not to mention, they kind of come with a reputation. It's same as the Eldrazi, they kind of come with a reputation of a certain type of player that plays slivers.
yeah. I mean, like, if you've only got like 2 or 3 slivers on the board, it's not a problem. Once you get 4 or 5 going, you become the arch enemy a lot of the times.
Right. So if you're a newer player, I mean, if you've, I think Elf Ball is a good example of this, which is if you've got one elf out, nobody cares. By the time you've got 7, 8, 12 elves out, you've become a problem. It's like that, but slivers get there faster. You've got one sliver that says, "Oh, I'm gonna give them all flying," and you go, "Who cares?" There's only one thing flying. Then the next one comes out and goes, "Oh, now they also all have first strike. Oh, now this one gives them all." Death touch. This one gets so now you're looking at something that has every keyword.
And then your opponent slams down the infect sliver.
Yeah, exactly. And suddenly you're like, well, they all have first strike, trample, infect, death touch, haste, and flying. What am I going to do now? Um, so there's a couple, like, basically all the popular slivers, let's be honest, are all 5 colors because slivers aren't every color. So this one fits the same mold, which is Sliver Grave Mother. When I first read it, I thought it said grandmother, and I was like, this makes no sense, but it's gray, so sure. But we've got Sliver Grave Mother, who is straight up Wooburg. So that is white, blue, black, red, and green for a 6/6 legendary creature Sliver. Um, the legend rule does not apply to slivers you control, meaning you can duplicate them. Each sliver creature card in your graveyard has Encore X, where X is its mana value, and this comes with Encore 5. So, real quick, I'm going to read Encore because, unlike a lot of the things we've been talking about, Menace and stuff like that, Encore is not one you see all or very rarely. So, Encore is you pay the Encore cost. So, in Grave Mother's case, it's 5. Then you would exile this card from your graveyard. For each opponent, you create a token copy that attacks that opponent this turn if able. They gain haste, and you sacrifice them at the beginning of your next instep. You activate only as a sorcery. So, in an example of Sliver Grave Mother, if this is in your graveyard, you would pay 5, exile it from your graveyard. Assuming you have a full table, so 3 opponents, you would make 3 copies of Grave Mother. They would all essentially be goaded in a sense, so they have to attack if able. They all have haste, so they can attack right away. So you would instantly swing 3, 6/6s in different directions, and then on your instep, they all cease to exist. Which is why the legend rule at the beginning of this card exists, because you could populate out 3 legendary slivers that all have to attack right away. It's a mouthful. Dylan, what are we thinking?
Yeah, so sadly, as much as I want to build a sliver deck, this is probably not the commander I would use for it. I'm going to give this a 5.
Same as Zuladoc. So the 2 that are the most hyped decks are the 2 you're ranking out as the lowest.
Right, and it's not that I really have an issue with the Grave Mother. Unlike the Eldrazi, I think this card would fit really good in the 99. However,
Right.
the it's just because of Encore, because now you are exiling your slivers to have token copies for a single turn. But this is a 5
You're
color
not getting it
commander.
back.
Yeah, you've
Mhm.
got access to green and black, the 2 colors that are able to bring creatures back from the graveyard super easily. So why would you want to
Mhm.
remove them from the game permanently when you can just recycle them and keep using them over and over again?
Right. Now, I will say the other alternative you could look at this, if we took away the encore fact and we just looked at the legend rule aspect of it, you could do things I think with white, green, and kind of make token copies of your own slivers and cheat it that way, but that doesn't really hit the heart of that card. That's just sort of like you could also do this.
Right.
Agree with you that this is a great in the 99, but if I'm building slivers, I mean, it's got to be like the first sliver, Sliver Queen, and Hive Lord, and this is like the 4th best commander.
Yeah, I mean, you've also got Sliver Overlord that's really good.
Right. So, but that's what I'm saying is like this has got to be
Yeah. Now,
like your fourth or fifth best one, if that.
so I would instantly turn this from a 5 to a 7 or 8 if instead of Encore, if it gave all your slivers ward.
Like Ward X and X was equal to its mana value.
Uh, I wouldn't go that strong. I'd say like all slivers you control have
Like Ward
ward
2.
pay 2 life or ward 2.
Now, okay, so let me ask you this: if we went a different direction, instead of Encore, but something that's same flavor, what if it had Myriad, which is when it attacks, you make a token copy for each opponent that's attacking that opponent. So like
Oh,
your
yeah, no.
Grave Mother attacks, and then you make 2 tokens that are attacking the other 2 that vanish at the end of the turn.
If this had Myriad, this would again, this would jump to like an 8 or a 9.
Right, which I think would, I mean, obviously I wouldn't name it Grave Mother if it had Myriad, but if it was like Grave Mother or Mother Lord or something, Nest Mother, something like that.
Sliver Nest Tender.
You take that back. Gavi is the only nest tender. And Atla Palani, the only 2 that can tend the nests.
But yeah, no, like if this was a Myriad commander, it would be this would probably be my favorite. But Encore, it's just I don't know. Maybe as kind of like an end game ability, Encore's really good, but I wouldn't want to use it till like the end game.
Okay, so to wrap this up, um, so we won't know more about these decks until we get closer to Commander Master's release date. We do know they have got 90 reprints, 10 new cards, including the Commander. I would venture to say that even though everybody's excited for Eldrazi and Sliver, my gut says that the dollar ones are probably not in there. They might be chase cards in the set proper, but I don't see them in the deck, which therefore means the Sliver one I would probably say has more value than the Eldrazi because the Eldrazi drop off a lot harder than the Slivers. Um, but if you got to pick one, which one are we going for?
Uh if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick the enchantment deck because that's a playstyle I haven't really tried before, and I feel like that would be a good deck to kind of step into an enchantment based deck.
Okay, I think the enchantment deck. Just looking at the commanders and imagining I could build the 99, however it humors me, right? I think the enchantment one comes out the strongest to me. Um, Obviously, slivers are going to be strong in their own right because they're slivers, but I think as far as value the commander adds, I agree with you. Enchantments, probably the deck I would go for, followed by the planeswalkers, just try like a new flavor. The Eldrazi one is probably the least for me.
Yeah, I'd probably choose enchantment as my main one if I had to pick one. If I couldn't find a copy of the enchantment deck, probably Planeswalker Party, and then yeah, like you said, Eldrazi's the least interesting looking one.
Yeah, and slivers like right behind the planeswalkers. But that is it with the news. So we're gonna go ahead and take a quick break. I would say hear a word from our sponsors, but we got none. But if you got money and you want to sponsor us, I mean, hit me up, I guess. But we're going to take a quick break, grab some water, all that good stuff. When we get back, we're going to be talking Oathbreaker. So stay tuned. And we're back. You should buy all those amazing products and more because they seemed like great people. Unless, of course, there was no ad, in which case you should boycott everybody because they have horrible taste in who they sponsor. But we're back. We're talking Oathbreaker now that we've gotten through the news. So Oathbreaker is a new, well, not new. It's been around a couple years now, but it is sort of a Commander-y offshoot type format that we thought we'd talk a little bit about, give our thoughts on, because it's definitely picking up in popularity in the most recent months and starting to see a lot more competitive kind of play at tournaments.
All right. Now, before we get into it, have you ever played Oathbreaker yourself?
I have played a handful of games online. I've never played a in-person kind of event, so I can only speak to my narrow-ish experience, and I will tell you that I am not an expert by any means. How about yourself?
Never played the format. I've played maybe one game of Brawl in the past, but never Oathbreaker.
So you're going to buckle in tight and listen to two people who have no clue what they're talking about. Talk about something with such depth of knowledge that you could be more of an expert than we are. So Oathbreaker, I'm going to run through kind of a quick overview of the rules, how it's similar to, how it's different from Commander. And then we can kind of talk about thoughts, kind of different strategies, at least I've seen online, stuff like that. So Oathbreaker is a 60 card singleton multiplayer format, which is similar to Commander. So you have a deck of 60 cards, excluding the basic lands. Everything else can only be a single copy thereof. So each deck contains a 58 card main deck, and then one Oathbreaker Planeswalker commander, and one signature spell. Now, they must all maintain the same color identity of your Oathbreaker, in the same sense as in Commander, everything has to maintain the color identity of your commander. And then your Oathbreaker and your signature spell exist in the command zone and are subject to command tax and all that good stuff. It's same as Commander. And everybody starts with 20 life. So smaller deck. You're using planeswalkers in place of commanders themselves, or as commanders rather. And then they each come with their own signature spell that you can cast at any time out of the command zone with timing restrictions. I will say, because Magic kind of muddles this a little differently than a lot of other card games out there. So signature spell in this case is restricted to instants and sorceries. So even though technically by Magic rules,
Everything's a
artifacts
spell.
and everything, yeah, everything's a spell that's not a land, pretty much. Um, so you are restricted to instants and sorceries, and your Oathbreaker has to be out to cast the spell, because by lore-based standards, if you're running Sarkhan, Sarkhan's the one casting the spell, so Sarkhan's in the command zone, who's casting the spell. And then you've got your usual 4-pod with 20 starting life. So you brought up Brawl. Similar, but different in the sense that Brawl, I guess, will be what you consider like a Commander light format, which is 60 card deck. One of those is your commander, so it has to be a legendary creature in the same sense as a commander.
Well, I think you could use planeswalkers in Brawl, because if I remember correctly, my Brawl
Can
deck,
you?
I think Nicol Bolas the God Pharaoh was my commander for my Brawl deck.
So I've only played Brawl in Arena.
That's the only
and
place I've played it too.
I use Sir Rolf, the wolf from Kaldheim. Now, the main difference I know of between Oathbreaker and Brawl is, well, excluding the Planeswalker stuff and the signature spell, is that Brawl is standard linked, whereas Oathbreaker is legacy. So you can play any card in Oathbreaker as long as it's not on their ban list, whereas on Brawl, you're tied to standard rotation.
Right, and that really is the only difference. Is the limit of the cards, because again, with Brawl, your commander can be a planeswalker or a legendary creature, but you're stuck with standard legal cards. So I think standard's the last 8 sets.
Yeah, now, spoiler alert, when we get to question of the week, somebody asks a question about standard that I kind of threw in there because also kind of tied into commander a little bit. So we'll talk about standard in a bit, but yeah, it's typically about the last 8 sets spanning a couple years.
Except for
So,
things that are not standard legal, like some of the D&D sets were not standard legal.
right, or Modern Horizons, which went straight into Modern. Commander Masters is not going to be standard legal. It's going to be a Commander only product.
Commander Legends wasn't standard legal.
Usually the I keep saying anthology for lack of a better word. I don't know if this is a correct usage of the term, but yeah, usually the anthology based sets where it's like Commander Legends, Baldur's Gate. That's a Commander specific set. Now it does go into other things because there are things that use other Commander cards. Modern Horizons, for example, is legal in Commander, but it was never legal in Standard.
Right.
So Oathbreaker lets you access all the same pool of cards that are Commander or Legacy or Vintage legal, with the exception of like a small compared to Commander and compared to Standard, a small kind of restricted list.
Right. Oathbreaker seems to be built for faster games because you're using a standard sized deck and the standard life total.
Mm-hmm. And not to mention, I mean, even though you're playing with multiplayer, the fact that you can access a signature spell helps a lot too, because it helps pick up the pace. Now, when I was going through it and kind of in my play experience, what do you think if you were building a deck? I mean, what would you lean towards as your signature spell, in the sense of people seem to kind of go in two directions. One was game finisher, and one was kind of like efficiency. So, you had some people that went for like your 2 mana growth spirals, and you had some people that went for like their 10 mana big finisher spell. Where do you think you would kind of fall on that scale?
Okay. So, obviously, let's just say that I'm using, you know, I think that with my signature spell, it would probably be some sort of advantage engine. You mentioned growth spiral. I think that's a good one. But then I get thinking about things. It's like there's nothing saying that I can't just make my signature spell vampiric tutor or demonic tutor or
Right.
mystical tutor, and just fishing out, the leaving my signature spell not as one of my combo pieces, but using it to where I can fish out every piece in consecutive turns.
Yeah, so you're right. There's nothing to say that, vampiric tutors or you're demonic, or I mean, diabolic would be a little expensive if you keep adding it up. But
Oh,
yeah, there's nothing preventing you from putting your tutors down as your signature spell,
you,
except for the command tax over and over again.
you know what? I just thought about what would be a great signature spell: Ponder.
just to mess with your card, your deck.
Yeah, just rearranging the top of your deck and getting that free draw every time.
Yeah. Um seem to be kind of the two in my experience. So time that I played, so I included the cards on here just so I could reference them. But the time that I played somebody that was running Garrick, the Apex Devastator, which is a 7 mana kind of planeswalker, which seems expensive until you think about the format and then you think about what it does. So Garrick is 5, a black and a green, comes in with 5 loyalty, but because you can activate him, I obviously activate a planeswalker right away. His +1 is destroy another target planeswalker. So you can bring him out and just get rid of the other person's commander, which prevents them from playing their um their signature spell and their strategy. Or you can +1 them to make a 3/3 beast with death touch. You can -3 him to destroy target creature, gain life equal to its toughness. Or you can -8 to give an opponent an emblem that's whenever your creature attacks, it gets +5/+5 and gains trample. So you can pretty much just free blow up their commander, and
No,
then eventually put emblems on everybody to give them all like a disgusting version of Overrun.
I mean, hey, play a doubling season one turn, then play Garrick the next turn. He comes in with 10 loyalty. Give someone an emblem.
Yeah. And now, you talk about doing Growth Spiral or doing a low mana, something like, like a Vampiric Tutor or stuff like that. The people that kind of played down your mentality, we talked a lot last episode about the value of Ward and just putting like an extra 2 mana on something. The thought of having a Vampiric Tutor for 1, that's fantastic. That's a great card. Vampiric Tutor at 3, once you do command tax, and it's not the worst tutor, but it's getting there. Vampiric Tutor at 5, at 7. I mean, that's
no, I
hot doo-doo garbage.
Like after the 5, that's where I would stop unless I have some way of doing like
if you set up like a win con, right?
Yeah, like because after just searching up 3 cards will be enough to get you every piece you need for a win condition.
Now, if you were to look at your Planeswalkers, right? I was thinking about this. I feel like you either have to value Planeswalkers that are either building their own defenses. We talked about Guff back in the news segment where he makes his own 1/1 wizards. So do you value something that either builds a board presence to defend itself, or in the Garrick example, comes out and destroys another target Planeswalker, and who cares? Who cares what you put on the board?
Yeah, honestly, I think that I would mostly go for Planeswalkers that either protect themselves or have a really good utility ability. Things I'm thinking about, I know that there's that Chandra that easily puts emblems on your opponent that makes them take 1 damage whenever you do whatever it was. I can't remember exactly. We talked about the War of the Spark Ashiok. Play that turn 3. Now your opponent can't search their deck.
So the one I thought about was the Wandering Emperor. That's the new one that came out of Neon Dynasty.
Pretty good card.
Yeah, so it does kind of like a nice combination of both. So it's 4 mana. It comes out, but for a +1, you can put a 1/1 counter and give something first strike till end of turn. Then for -1, you can make 2/2 samurais with vigilance. So yeah, it does down tick you, unlike Garrick that's upticking you to make 3/3 beasts. This does down tick you, but having a 2/2 samurai with vigilance that you can turn into a 3/3 samurai with first strike and vigilance is not. I think that's pretty decent. And then for a signature spell, I think it's a flavor win on my part. I was thinking Cut Short, which is a card that honestly would never see play in Commander because it's not a great value piece. Because for 2 and a white, you can destroy target Planeswalker that was activated this turn, or you tap a creature, which isn't that great until you factor in that you can convoke it. So if Wandering Emperor has 3 samurais or 3 of anything out, you could tap those, send out Cut Short for free at instant speed to knock out a target Planeswalker. And if you bring out Planeswalkers in this kind of format, you're going to activate them the turn it comes out. So you either destroy it, like destroy an opponent's commander, or you have it sitting there with a threat of activation at any time.
Yeah, definitely. Honestly, I think that some of the better things for your Oathbreakers would probably be the Commander Planeswalkers from like the 2018 deck. So like Saheeli the Gifted, Lord Windgrace, things like that.
Let me check real quick, but I believe Saheeli is banned. There's one Planeswalker that was banned. Let me type it in real quick. Oathbreaker ban list. It is Saheeli. Da, da. This up. Soul Ring. Soul Ring was like notably banned on this.
That's kind of understandable.
Yeah, the Gifted is banned.
Oh, really? Oh, I mean, that's
See,
understandable.
only because I was looking at it, it was the only Planeswalker that was banned. Um, that literally, I was like, oh, I wonder if there's any Planeswalkers that are banned as commanders, and that was it. That was the only one.
All right.
I think on you know the ones that are kind of set as being your commander, those are pretty solid though as a
Yeah.
whole.
Uh, yeah, like, you know what? Estrid would have been fun. I'm sure you could do something really fun with what's her face? Aminatu.
That lets you pass things around.
No, Aminatu is the one that lets you control your like the top of your deck,
Mhm.
so that you can get
Um,
your miracles and things like that.
so let me ask you this: so Soul Ring's banned.
I
This
think
isn't
that's
a format you hop in, but what do
yeah.
you think?
I think Soul Ring being banned is really good because unlike Commander, you have a smaller deck, so you have a better chance of running into it. And I don't know, mana fixing of that degree in such a small deck, that's going to get out of hand really fast. Like I noticed
Right.
that Mana Vault, Mana Crypt are banned, Jeweled Lotus is banned because it's just too
All
fast to
your fast
yeah,
mana.
yeah, it's just too fast for the format.
Well, and then there's also I think you got to look at not just fast for the format as far as ramping, but really in a 58 card main deck, your chances of drawing any one card are that much higher. Because you got to figure out of 99 cards, if you draw your opening 7 and then your 8th card on to start your turn in Commander, you've got a little over an 8% chance of you drawing Soul Ring out of that opening hand.
Yeah, I mean,
Whereas out of this, I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot higher.
yeah, I mean, you're opening 7 cards. That is an eighth of your deck right there.
I
Now,
mean,
and
mm,
I will say though, Oathbreaker, just to go back as we mentioned Brawl a little bit, I do feel like Oathbreaker is definitely a more playable format because being locked to just the standard sets, that gets a little expensive.
it does. And you know what I like about this, just on face value, right? Is I feel like it's a more exciting play style. Because with Brawl, it's just I mean, look, we've all played Commander. I love Commander, don't get me wrong, but it's Commander at 60 cards, whereas Planeswalkers are admittedly just don't shine as well in Commander. They can't for the most part they can't be your commander. There's some that can, but most of them cannot. Um, it's very rare that you get to pull off an ultimate in Commander. Now, I think when you assess your Oathbreaker, I don't know that you really weigh the ultimate in here either. When compared to like your upticks, it's walkers really very rarely get to shine in Commander. So it's nice to see a format where you can play these kind of cards that are very iconic to the lore that you just don't see on a daily basis.
Right, right. And also, there's just some decks that are really good that just aren't going to work as well in the format with commanders having to be planeswalkers. Because let's face it, you want to build a zombie tribal deck? Well, when it comes to having to build it around a planeswalker, you're going to be limited to mono black for the most part because there's no real good Demir zombie planeswalker.
Yeah, and I think these are some of the more exciting kind of opportunities. So I mean, when we look at Garruk, right, the Garruk Apex Predator, He's your big bad, obviously, I think, for the format. No, I'm not saying he's the most played Oathbreaker because I don't know that. I honestly I tried looking to see if I could find stats on this anywhere, and it doesn't. There's just not a database the same way EDH Rec has a database that you can pull up all kinds of stats about commanders. But this seems to be like the pain in the format. If we dig beyond that, I mean, the Wandering Emperor, I feel like, is a great card. It's seeing some play in standard, but once it rotates out of standard, I mean, am I going to see this card in Commander? Probably not, because there's other better mono white +1/+1 counter strategies that don't involve me waiting whole turn rotations, to bring out a 4 mana planeswalker.
Right, and 4 mana is kinda slow in Commander, like, you want your heavy hitting cards to come out a little bit faster.
You got to figure 4 mana for one counter, and maybe you get to do it again next turn. But let's look at one single counter or one single 1/1 counter. And I mean, for 4 mana, Cathar's Crusade is 5, and it puts a counter on every single creature I control whenever another creature enters the battlefield. So I could pump out a ton of creatures, and abuse that for 10 plus counters on a turn.
Yeah, no, yeah, like, I definitely feel like this is a format that should stay a lot more casual because Commander was supposed to be casual, and then people just went and made it not casual. I would kind of like this to stay kind of a low power creep format for just fun, quick little matches.
I think it has that potential because it focuses on planeswalkers, which in Commander are pretty much left in the dust because the power, when you look at a planeswalker, the big splashy thing is its ultimate ability. In Commander, you very rarely get to pull off that ultimate ability. I think in this, I almost wonder if there's not more of a social contract where you can go whole games of Commander without people interacting with your commander itself if it's too threatening. I wonder if you can't have, let's say, like a Wandering Emperor last a whole game because people look at it and go, oh, whatever, it's putting out Samurai and putting out counters, but it's not really a removal target in the same sense that like a Garrick would be, or and that anything in the top 100 commanders in Commander is, oh, I see Chulane come out, or I saw Edgar Markov come out. I'm a path to exile that sucker, or I'm gonna,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
but
remove it.
no, watch. As soon as we upload this, we're gonna get the announcement. Oathbreaker Masters.
Speaking of like masters and stuff, this was the question I had for you because you're more robust on the lore than I am. With Oathbreaker as a name, now, what is this referring to? Do you know? Like, is it the Gatewatch oath, or because not all the planeswalkers were part of the Gatewatch?
Yeah, no, like Oathbreaker, it probably does have to deal with when Nissa broke her oath and left the Gatewatch because Liliana wanted the Gatewatch to hunt down her demon masters that she was tied to so that she could get her soul released and keep all of her power without being controlled by anyone, which ended up failing and she ended up becoming a slave to Nicol Bolas during War of the Spark.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a good name. You know, because people want to, like, from a marketing standpoint, it's a good name. Um, but I mean, the Gatewatch consists of only a small fraction of the planeswalkers.
Yeah, so you got your original five with
Mhm.
Chandra, Jace, Gideon, Nissa, and uh, Chandra, Gideon, Nissa,
Oh, oh.
Liliana. That's the one I was forgetting.
You just gotta go around the color pie, man.
Yeah, well, Liliana was the fifth member. It was originally just the four, and then Johnny and Teferi ended up joining.
Mhm.
And I think that's all the Planeswalker. Oh, Kaya ended up joining after War of the Spark.
All you need to know, honestly, if you guys need to know who's on the Gatewatch, look for who's the biggest goody two shoes of all the planeswalkers. The ones that are the most like, my nose is in the air, I'm better than you. I look down on anybody who gets their hands dirty on the Gatewatch.
Well, no, that's like the complete opposite of Gideon Jorah. Rest in peace.
Listen, Gideon is a squeaky boy. He don't know how to get dirty, down and dirty like my boy Garrick does.
Yeah, but I guess Oathbreaker was just the name because I guess the format came out during the era of the Gatewatch when they were just the things always leading the story. The Justice League.
See, okay, so best I can figure out, it came out in about 2019, 2020. From my research, seemed to be about the earliest mentions I could see. Um, Now, what I enjoy looking and thinking about different planeswalkers out there is there are a lot of ones that kind of break the color pie in a sense. So, what like if you had to name one, like what is your favorite planeswalker that's out there? Like not specific card, but character.
Oh, favorite Planeswalker character. That has been, for the longest time, my boy, Johnny Goldmane.
Okay, so Johnny's white green for the most part.
Except for that one time he was white red.
We don't speak of that. But you know, so when you think of white green, you think of lifelink, you think of populate, stuff like that, which is what a Johnny typically does, is a lot of lifelink and stuff. Now, when you think of Simic, you tend to think of card draw, ramp, and value engine stuff. Well, I'm a big Oko fan, you know, who's my little fairy boy from Eldraine. um, but the Thief of Crowns, which is the card that got banned, was not banned in Commander, but it was banned in a ton of formats, including Standard at one point. I think he's rotated out of Standard at this point, but
Oh yeah, he's way out of standard.
yeah. Now, who knows what comes out in the next Eldraine? You know, when he's Wild Eldraine, Crazy Oko. But this card, I love it because it's +2 to create a food token. +1 is Kendra's transformation on a planeswalker because, you know, if you guys know the lore, this is the one bit of lore I do know is how Oko turned Kenrith into the elk, which is why you have the removal spell Kenrith's transformation. Well, that's his +1 ability. So you can change an artifact or a creature into a 3/3 elk. And then -5, you exchange control over of one of your target artifacts or creatures for another creature that an opponent controls with power 3 or less. So right off the bat, I mean, Simic artifacts, you see blue artifacts, you see Azorius artifacts, but Simic with green artifacts is, I think, would be super cool.
Yeah, no, I can see that being a thing that people would want to build, and I know there's that one commander from Dominar United that's Gruul artifacts, which usually Gruul is very anti-artifact, so but it's not a planeswalker, it's a legendary creature, so it doesn't really break the pie like Oko does for this format.
Yeah, no, I think Oko's interesting because he kind of like cheats it a little bit. So the reason why he's Simic artifacts is because the food token, because the food is technically an artifact, but food, unlike treasure and stuff, like treasure and clues, you know how they all kind of align somewhat to certain colors. Like you see a lot of clues in like your blue and black decks. Food is a very green artifact, so the fact it just helps that he gets an artifact in his color, and then is not a color that typically plays well in artifacts. So I think it opens up some interesting possibilities.
Oh,
I
for
don't know what the
certain.
win con would be, but
And I mean, I guess what you would do is just +1 Oko a lot of times to just remove big threats from your opponent's board, and then just give them some useless artifacts in exchange for the 3/3s.
now another thing I wanted to talk about on this is we've seen cards go up in pricing due to their viability in certain formats. So, you have like your Vidalcan Orreries and stuff that have blown up in price because they've been mentioned for Commander, even though they're not super valuable in other formats or just super played. Meat Hook Massacre, before it was banned in Standard, was monstrously through the roof because of how good it was in Standard. Now, it was good in other formats, but Standard was the one kind of making that price. Do you see Oathbreaker at any point getting to that aspect? Because there are a lot of removal spells and stuff that are, destroy target planeswalker, but excuse me, but in Commander, I mean, they don't see play. In Standard, they don't really see play. Do you think Oathbreaker has kind of like the cachet to move that needle at all?
Honestly, as fun as the format sounds, I'm going to say no. I don't think that Oathbreaker is really going to be affecting the prices of cards anytime soon. Now, if the format gets a little bit bigger, possibly, but within the next year or two, I don't see it happening.
Right. Now, I'm curious to see how it starts to expand because in the upcoming Command Fests, they do have like sanctioned events for Oathbreaker popping up at those Command Fests hand in hand. So usually those are a good sign for how well these things will do going forward because they throw out these sort of like tester events, or they throw out these try a new format, or let's try a new draft style, stuff like that, to see what the reaction from people are, because the people that go to Command Fest are people that are very invested in the game. If you don't love Magic the Gathering, you're not going to spend the time, the money, the effort to go to a Magic the Gathering event. And so if they have a bunch of people that are the type of people that are going to invest money in Magic the Gathering or buy product, and they go and they love that event, that usually is a benchmark for whether or not Wizards is going to invest in it in the future. So if it goes gangbusters this summer at Command Fest, I mean, do you think Oathbreaker decks could be on the horizon, going maybe not this year, but going into next summer?
I could see them testing it out. I know that we did get those those pre-made popper decks and that other format I can't remember they made pre-con decks for, but I don't think those really popped off well enough that we're going to see that kind of thing again. So I
So
could,
I remember Brawl decks came out and they were very um not liked.
yeah,
There were cards in there that people enjoyed, but because Tulane actually, if I remember, was from one of the Brawl decks.
right, yeah, it was Trulane, Ayara, uh, Corvold the Fakehurst King, and I can't remember the name of the knight one, but I know there was a red, black, white knight deck.
Is it Sir Gwen?
Yeah, Sir Gwyn.
It gives you like free enchantment or free equipments.
Yeah, free equipment to your knights, but when an equipped knight attacks, you take 1 damage and draw a card.
Right. So those are, I think, notorious now for introducing some of the most pushed commanders.
Corvold's
Um,
almost $30 from what I remember.
yeah. So I mean, if we just look at those decks, right? Corvold and Tulane are, if you go around the internet, are probably the most I'm not gonna say hated, but probably the most like leery commanders that people are not excited to see. Ayara also can be extremely broken in the right build. Sir Gwyn, I wouldn't say is broken, but
It's definitely the least powerful of the four.
it's the least powerful. But I think if you look at knight-based commanders, other than the one that just came out, the Esper Knight, it's probably the best knight-specific commander.
Right.
Now Brawl itself, everybody kind of laughed off because, like we said, or like you were saying, staying invested in a standard rotating format expensive.
Yeah. But honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing pre-con Oathbreaker decks again. I just don't want Wizard to get too invested in it because Commander used to be just a casual format created by the fans, and then Wizard started making product for it. And now we're oversaturated with Commander stuff.
Right. We've got Commander Masters coming up. Now, went back to like 2015, 2016. When they were first kind of investing in Commander, there's some cool decks out there, but not the 2016, 2017 Commander deck. If you pulled that precon out today, it would get steamrolled by precons out, or by the precons that you just take off the shelf today.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're so oversaturated because this the celebration that would be had over Commander Masters 6 years ago would be through the roof because people were so excited that they're finally being recognized. But now it's okay, we've got Commander Masters. Then 2 months after we had another Commander specific product in Universes Beyond Lord of the Rings. Last year we had Baldur's Gate, we've had the other D&D set. There's been so many Commander Legends came out. We've had so many Commander things, and then with every set that comes out, there's 2, 3, 4 Commander decks.
Right. To put this in perspective for newer Magic fans, when Commander decks were first being released, we had the yearly Commander decks.
Mm-hmm.
Now we get about 2 to 4 Commander decks per set.
Yeah, because I remember, we call them now like the Ikoria Commander decks, but those were really Commander 2019 decks. They just happened to be Ikoria, specific cards. Now it's like if you had to tell me, hey, what were the Commander 2022 decks? So name the 20 of them that came out.
Yeah.
So your concern would be that Oathbreaker, to bring it back, Oathbreaker decks would be oversaturate and populate the set, or I'm sorry, the format.
That is the fear, that because I feel like Wizards would do that because Wizards likes their money. So if it became a popular enough format, I could see us getting 2 Commander decks and 2 Oathbreaker decks per set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
Don't be like, I would love to see a lot more new and creative Planeswalkers, and that is the other fear, is that they would just keep reprinting the same Planeswalker but new version. So here's the 18th Chandra Oathbreaker deck.
So this is why I agree with you, right? And this is why I think this is a topic I want to talk about on this episode, is because we talked a little bit. I don't know that we talked on recording or on camera, but we talked separately about how with the March of the Machine and the Aftermath, it gave an opportunity for a lot of new characters to be introduced. So I think this is why Oathbreaker could have a potential to kind of grow in the coming months, because you're going to see I feel like you'll probably see new Planeswalkers other than, like you said, hey, this is my 15th Chandra who does the same thing as all the other Chandras, but just slightly different. Or, how many Jaces can I have that let me either draw a card or mill somebody's card out? So, I mean, that is just a quick thought on Oathbreaker. I know we didn't go too super in depth on it, but real quick, just to wrap it up, one Planeswalker you're going to build and signature spell if you were to get into this format. Go, Dylan.
Let's see now. I think that my Oathbreaker would be Ashiok Dream Render, the
Okay.
one from War of the Spark. So it's a good commander because it'll, shut down my opponent's decks and stuff like that. They can't search, and now I can mill them. And signature spell, I think I would have to go with. Oh god, this is so hard. What would be a good signature spell, honestly?
For blue black,
You know what?
Mending Cacophony could be interesting. Keep bringing it out and milling them for half their deck.
Yeah, that could be good. Or maybe I'd go with just looking at my mill deck, you know what? Paranoid Delusions. It's a blue and a black. Target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into the graveyard, and then it has Cipher, where you can exile it from the graveyard and encode it onto a creature so they gain that ability. I don't know if it would hit the graveyard before going to the command zone again or not, so I don't know how that interaction would work with
So
Oathbreaker.
the signature spell does. So it meets the same rules as your commander would, or your Oathbreaker would. So it would technically die upon resolution, so to speak, hit your graveyard, and then you could place it into your command zone.
Yeah, okay, so it would work. So, Paranoid Delusions, I'd play it, it would go to the graveyard, I would then cipher it onto a creature. Now I've got a copy of Paranoid Delusions equipped to that creature. Now it's back in my command zone, so I can play it again and equip it to another creature.
Okay. What I was thinking is Nicol Bolas Planeswalker, because I think it's probably the most oppressive thing you could play. I mean, it's 8 mana, so you're kind of restricted in that regards, but it's for +3. You destroy target non-creature permanent, which other people's Oathbreakers, spoiler alert, are non-creature permanents. So I'd get rewarded because I get 3 loyalty counters for that. Then there's a middle ability that lets you gain control of target creature. Don't care. But the bottom one, for -9, is it deals 7 damage to target player. That player discards 7 cards and then sacrifices 7 permanents. And I would love to pair that with Torment of Hailfire, which we talked about last episode, but is X black to copy Torment of Hailfire X times, where they either have to discard a card, sacrifice a permanent, or take 3 damage for every single opponent. So I just think it would be like, hey, I only need to bring these things out once a piece and then just bombard you back to the Stone Age.
Yeah, no, that'd be the really fun combination right there, honestly. Nicol Bolas is definitely one of those characters that I feel like you can build a competent deck around no matter what format.
It would be one of those ones where it's super evil, and I would probably win almost never because it's so mana intensive and people would see it coming a mile away.
Yeah, people would probably hard target you before Nicol Bolas hits the board.
For sure. But that's just, we had some quick thoughts on Oathbreaker. Check out the format. Seems really fun. If you guys ever want to catch a game, I mean, always reach out to us. You never know. I can't say that we'll always be available, but, you never know. So real quick, we got question of the week, card of the week. Go ahead.
Before we get to that, if this video among all platforms can get to like 500 likes, we'll do an Oathbreaker match on Arena.
And we'll host it on Dylan's OnlyFans.
Guess I got to make that now.
Oh, it's canon. It's canon. All right, so we got question of the week, card of the week, and then we'll be wrapping up here. So, real quick, question of the week. This week's question comes from Jake. And if you like Jake's question, you can always leave us one as well down in the comments of this episode. I believe you can also leave comments and remarks on Spotify and Apple Podcasts if you like it there, or you can always send it to us Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. We'll get into a second. But Jake would like to know, do you think the changes Wizards of the Coast has announced with standard rotation is an admission that Commander is now the leading format for Magic? Now, before I throw it to you, I'm going to just real quick, standard rotation, so what he's talking about, the changes they've made. So typically, your standard sets will rotate out. I believe we just talked about a little bit ago, usually about every 8 sets or roughly 2 years. Now, Wizards of the Coast just announced that they were going to postpone standard rotation for a full year, with the goal of like stabilizing standard. So things that would have rotated out with Wilds of Eldraine are still going to be Commander legal, or I'm sorry, standard legal for a whole nother year. So we won't see anything start to rotate out until 2024. So do you think that those changes are, I guess, Wizard of the Coast admission that Commander is now the lead format and Standard is kind of taking a back seat and they need to stabilize it?
Uh honestly, I know that Commander has become more of a popular format because, as we said, we're oversaturated with Commander decks. And one of the lead designers, Mark Rosewater, I believe Commander is his favorite format. Don't quote me on that. I know that he loves the color green. Can't remember if he loves Commander.
Okay.
But I know Commander has become a lot more popular, and it does seem like a lot of cards are being made to favor Commander. I know a lot of people said that the power creep seems to be getting worse the more they focus on Commander. So
Mm-hmm.
I think this could be a change that is because of Commander. I feel like Commander might be the reason why they're changing the rotation. However, Standard has also just gotten out of hand from what I've heard. I don't play Standard and I don't keep up with it, but I've heard some people say that Standard is just kind of broken right now with some of the cards that interact with each other.
So, okay, so I play Standard. I keep up with Standard in a very like cursory sense. Like I know, like I'm aware of, hey, this is busted, this not busted. Um, so right now, obviously the big sort of skeletons in the room are like Blood Tithe Harvester. Um, just because it's a 2 mana like 4/3 that plays above curve. Um, now when I first saw this question, good question, but when I first saw this question, I don't think that it's Wizards of the Coast necessarily saying Standard is dead and we need to resuscitate it. What I think this is saying is money. Like all these decisions come down to money. And what I mean by that is Standard and Commander are different in the sense that when we look at the recent set that came out, March of the Machine, now there's I don't know the exact number, but let's ballpark it. Most of these sets range from 250 to about 350 cards. So let's just call it 300. Commander is not going to care about all 300 of those cards. They're going to worry about 10 to 25 of those cards may become Commander viable. So a lot of those things that are like your quote unquote draft chaff or those super commons that aren't good, some of those do hold value in Standard from the standpoint of it's the best blank in Standard. But with Commander, with Oathbreaker, with these other things that are legacy legal, it's not, because the best removal spell in red in this standard format might be, and I don't know, but it might be a 4 or 5 mana card. Whereas you look at a 5 mana, removal and commander, and you go, this thing is hot duty that I want nowhere near my deck unless I'm in a very specific strategy that plays on that. So I look at it just going, no, this is them wanting to keep these sets more viable going forward, so they have to sell more packs, and a lot of these cards become worth printing. And maybe that's cynical of me, but I think that's just the truth of the matter.
No, I completely get what you're saying there, and I feel like that is kind of a key factor in all this because there is just a lot of bulk filler cards in every set, unless you're playing standard. Then some of the filler cards that people don't want to use in other formats because they have older cards available become a little more tantalizing.
Now, I mean, if we take that away of is WotC hitting it or not, it has Commander become the lead set with Standard falling behind. Probably, just judging by if we look at the scope of the community, Commander events, there's more Commander content creators. We've talked about the sheer explosion of Commander products in recent years, things like that. Yeah, it's probably the more popular format, but Standard is probably the one that floats the bottom line a little better or a little more. Because you also have to figure that when this was made years ago, Commander is not the game. Standard is the game of Magic, was designed, was play tested, has carried, this company for years and years and years. And Commander is just sort of like an aberration created by fans that, yeah, you can piggyback on that and you can make product and you can totally reward that, but you can definitely, kind of sell that, market it, and make money off of that. But that's not the game, so to speak.
Yeah, and honestly, every format has its place. And I think that standard is something that should still be around. I know some people want to say, "Oh, we should just, uh, erase standard as a format." However,
So I think standard still exists, but you know,
yeah, the value I see in standard is sort of how I used it with getting into Magic. It's a good format for people trying to learn the game because
mhm.
there's a smaller card pool for them to have to focus on. So it allows them to use that smaller card pool to work on things like deck building and learning deck consistency. And then they
Well,
can experiment with the larger card pools of other formats once they get the idea of,
mhm.
okay, this is what makes a good magic card.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, because what I do, I actually people I've gotten into the game, I teach them via Modern, which is the same exact concept. The only reason is if I were to explain to somebody standard rotation while teaching them the game, their mind is instantly going to think, "Oh, I've got to constantly update this deck." But if I give them, "Hey, this is your casual modern deck," that's not their concern. Their concern is, "Oh, this deck can remain static," which Commander is kind of the same way for WotC, in the sense that, you know, short of you and I, wanted to tweak our decks, you could, in theory, build 100 card deck in 2015 and never look at it again, and just, as far as upgrades, and just constantly play it. In which case, WotC's not making any more money. Um, so they need standard at least to keep the bank accounts flowing. Um, but that's just our thoughts, or that's my thought, at least on the money. Obviously, I'm not going to speak for Dylan. But Jake, great question. Card of the week, Dylan. What do we got?
All right. So, card of the week. Now, I was trying to think of a fun card that I feel like people would really enjoy. And the one that came to mind for this week is actually a card that holds a lot of value to me personally as a Magic player is the Enchantment Aura Angelic Destiny. So for 2 colorless and 2 white mana, you enchant a creature. It gets +4/+4, gains flying and first strike, and it becomes an angel in addition to its other types. And when the enchanted creature dies, return Angelic Destiny to its owner's hand. So,
Okay.
reason why I picked this card, and I forgot we were going to talk about the commander decks, but it's an enchantment, and enchantments are good. There's a lot of strategies you can do with enchantments. As we talked about, flying is a very powerful ability because it gives you more evasive abilities. Getting +4/+4 onto your creature is really great. First Strike is really great. And then the fact that this card recycles itself, even better.
Oh, I agree. I mean, Rancor is another one that's well known for like recycling itself over and over again, being very useful. And that's only what a +1/+1 it gives your creature.
Something like that.
So, I mean, to get a +4/+4, and then the angel subtype is pretty solid as well.
Yeah. And then this card, as I mentioned, has a little bit of personal value to me. When I first got into Magic, this was actually the first mythic rare I ever pulled, and I loved running it in my white weenie standard deck that I had back then.
That's a terminology I haven't heard in a while. White weenies, but that's a very viable strategy of deck. Just all those 1/1, 2/2, white like soldiers and
Yep.
little beaters.
Mono white human tribal beatdown deck. That was my standard deck during
It's
Innistrad.
It's more sneakily powerful than a lot of people give it credit for. All right, guys. Well, I think that about wraps up our show. Just a quick reminder, if you enjoyed the show, UrCast airs every other Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so feel free to check it out before you guys head off to your Friday Night Magic or other game nights at your house. If you'd like to reach out to us, you can reach out to Dylan at Inuzuna. That's INUZUNA. I'm Cory. You can get me at Sleeve Card, or you can reach out to the show at UrCast Pod. That is up on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. The show also goes up on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. But that does it for another episode. We will catch you guys in a couple weeks. Dylan, what you got?
Yeah.
What you got?
Also, I want to say, if you want to contact us, but you don't use social media, you can always do contact.urcast@gmail.com.
That's it. Yep. Contact@urcast@gmail.com. But that being said, guys, that wraps up another episode of the UrCast. Hope you guys have an amazing week. May you never get mana flooded, and peace out.
Catch you on the flip side.